This episode is brought to you by DistroKid. DistroKid is the easiest way for musicians to get their music into all the platforms: Amazon, Apple, Tidal, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, and more. Plus, you've got unlimited uploads, and the artist keeps 100% of what they make. But what I love most about DistroKid is their app. The design of it just makes the whole process so easy. Now you can be sure that you're doing everything you need to do to get your music out there. Go to distrokid.com to check it out or download the app now.
Allow me to live and breathe like a man.
You've heard his words on classic albums like Pacific Ocean Blue and Friends. His 1969 collaboration with Brian Wilson, A World of Peace Must Come, gained almost legendary status as one of pop's most storied lost albums, before being resurrected to great acclaim by Light in the Attic in 2008. Now you're cordially invited to take a trip into the mind of poet and songwriter Stephen J. Kalinich. Heyday Again Records presents I Love My Life, a postcard from one of the last standing poets of peace and excitation. Order your copy today. I Love My Life by Stephen J. Kalinich and Friends. You'll see why heavy hitters like Brian Wilson, Dennis Wilson, Paul McCartney, Steve Cropper, P.F. Sloan, and Diana Ross have all worked with him. I Love My Life by Stephen J. Kalinich. Order today at realgonemusic.com. Again, that's realgonemusic.com. You wrote a book that I truly consider to be one of the 10 greatest novels I've ever read. Outside the Gates of Eden pretty much starts with Dylan going electric and two approximately 15-year-old high school kids who are at the outset of their friendship, and the impact that this concert has on these two guys, on these two kids.
A friend of mine who had not read much of the book, but he had read the beginning of it, said that Dylan concert was the last time that music could literally change somebody's life. And that's what the Dylan concert does in my book, I think. Yeah, so that's kind of where the book has to start, because it does change somebody's life, changed many lives.
Welcome to Discograffiti, the music obsessives podcast that gives freaks like you and me the chance to connect with the brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebrow, and with 4 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. Each new guest swings a hard left into an area you either had no idea you needed to know about or know all about and can't believe you're not alone out there. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on the novel Outside the Gates of Eden, along with our special guest, author Louis Shiner. Outside the Gates of Eden is author Louis Shiner's epic 863-page music-based novel that follows a series of characters from 1965 to the present day. It is an absolute masterpiece, one of the 10 best books I've ever read in my life. I'm excited to say that in this episode, Louis himself explains the book's origin, its adept blend of fact and fiction, how Dylan going electric became the leap-off point for both himself and for his main characters, how the entirety of Woodstock earned a place in the book as a tour de force tableau during an important sequence, the real-life stalwarts from the late 1960s rock scene who became characters in his world, and how he knew as an author that it was time to stop writing. If you're the kind of guy or gal for whom only the best will do, you'll want to turn this free version off right now and opt for the director's cut of this episode on our Patreon page, which is ad-free and features 13 additional minutes of essential material. And you can find it in our Patreon shop for mere pennies at patreon.com/discograffiti/shop. Here's what you're missing this week if you're not a Patreon member. If you're a member at the private tier, you're missing out on the director's cut of Part 6 of our Pet Sounds Deep Dive, plus a special presentation of literally the worst interview in Discograffiti history. If you're a member at the lieutenant tier, you're only missing out on the worst interview in Discograffiti history. And if you're a member at the major tier, well, you're not missing a single thing, because the major tier gives you access to everything that Discograffiti releases. Coming up, we've got Discograffiti's Billy Joel series with special guest Mark Robinson from Unrest, our Jefferson Airplane series featuring band members Jorma Kaukonen and Jack Cassidy, an interview with Lenny Waronker, Season 3 of the Beach Boys, and Your Dream Comes True series, which will absolutely, without question, delve deeper into pet sounds than anyone else ever has in history. Plus, an incredibly special Graham Nash deep dive, in which Graham himself rates and discusses everything he's ever released. That means solo, CSN, CSNY, C&N, and for good measure, Crosby's If I Can Only Remember My Name. So don't miss out. Open up your listening app right now and subscribe. And away we go then! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special episode of Discograffiti. Very special because our guest's glasses are hanging off his face in a manner that I have not ever seen in my days on this earth. And I appreciate you for that. Thank you, Louis.
My pleasure.
We're here with Louis Shiner, who actually I had interviewed a few weeks ago, and I think this interview will wind up coming out before the one about Glimpses, because the one about Glimpses dovetails with the Beach Boys Smile material, which is going to come down the line a little bit. And I think just because you have truly gotten me dizzy and hit me upside the head with this other book that you've written, and I really wanted to talk with you about that before it started fading in the least bit from my mind.
Or before I die. I'm really old.
You're old. I'm disease riddled. I mean, we're both going down the tubes in an obvious.
Hanging on the edge, hanging by our fingernails.
So, I mean, since our interview, it's fair to say that I have been stalking you. Am I not?
Oh, that's entirely true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've never had the distinct pleasure, and to you, dubious pleasure, of being able to associate with an author and tell them where in the book I am as I'm going through and reading something. And it just so happened that you wrote a book that I truly consider to be one of the 10 greatest novels I've ever read. I've read a lot of stuff in my time. And, a couple of years ago, a friend of mine who became one of the most beautiful Patreon members going, Randy Marcus, apropos of nothing whatsoever, he sent me a book called Outside the Gates of Eden. It was not accompanied by anything at all. It wasn't packaged with a note that said, here's a great book about music or anything. It just arrived mysteriously. And I made like a slightly cockeyed comment to my wife. This is really odd that, somebody would send me not just a book, but a huge book. The book is just short of 900 pages. It's massive. It's a doorstop. And it sat on my shelf. I had no intention of reading this for maybe 2 years. And then I put two and two together after reading Glimpses. And I realized, wait a second, this is not only the most recent book you've written, but your final book.
Randy is a great guy. He's been tireless in promoting the book. Like you now that you've been converted and had the Kool-Aid, or Rite Aid, I should point out, actual brand name. So God bless Randy Marcus, and I'm glad you finally got around to it.
And not only am I truly stalking you, taking shots of what page I'm at and all that kind of stuff, but I'm also sending you videos of random run-ins I'm having with people, random as a woman behind the booth at the DMV in East Orange, New Jersey, who is going to be reading your book and just proving to you, because you are understandably cynical, that nobody on the planet reads anymore. And I'm here to demonstrate to you that while you're for the most part correct, you're not entirely correct.
And thank you for doing that.
No problem. I mean, it is quite a trip. So let's dive into what makes this book so special. So first of all, it being Discograffiti, it should be known that most of what we're dealing with here is set against a tableau of music, and more specifically, the 1960s, even though it takes place over an expanse of about 50 or 60 years.
Correct.
And this took you 8 years to write?
That's right.
Okay, talk to me about the kinds of things that you wanted to tackle. And also tell me, did you know going into this that it would be your last book?
I didn't know that it would be my last at all. I did have an idea of where I wanted to go, but I had less of an idea than I've ever had going into a book before. I told you about this, that I had just finished recently Anna Karenina by Tolstoy. Love Tolstoy, one of my favorite writers. And I was just wondering what Tolstoy would write if he were alive now. And just immediately, the answer was he'd write about the Woodstock generation and the failure of that dream, because that's, to my mind, the central event of the 74 years that I've lived through. And that seemed to be all I needed. I just got going. I wanted to put one or more of the characters that what people traditionally think of as the 60s events. So there would be Woodstock in there. There had to be the Summer of Love. We had to have recording companies, all the stuff that you would expect in a novel that was covering those years. But I wasn't sure what exactly I was going to do with it. I just sat down and I started writing.
Similarly to Glimpses, we have an incredibly deft blend of fact and fiction. We have characters in this book who are very real. All the members of the Jefferson Airplane. You have other 60s stalwarts who are very much woven into the book, including Bill Graham is a character who pops up many times in the book. Did you get any time with him?
No, he was already dead, I think, by the time I started. But Graham really, of all the people in the book, he's the one who surprised me the most. Because I felt like I kind of had a grudge against Graham. He was so commercial. He was so money-oriented. And I had this vision of how he was going to appear in the book, and it was not going to be a really favorable impression that you got of him. But he got on stage and he's talking to Cole, and he's starting to talk about, you guys are dressed well. You showed up on time. We're going to get along. Who wrote that? What are you doing in here? Get out of my book. But,
well, I mean, think of what he had to put up with, at that time in that area.
Right, sure. He makes the statement several times in other books about him or whatever, but in interviews with him, that sure, you can go to the Avalon Ballroom. You'll have no guarantee that the person who's advertised as the headliner is even going to show up. You don't know when the show's going to start. You don't know if there's going to be food. The doors may be locked by the landlord. Or you can come to one of my shows, and it will run like clockwork, and you'll get exactly what you want.
Yeah.
And it's hard to argue with that. He's got a point.
Would you say it's an apt analysis of the book to say that this is an examination of dreams unfulfilled from a personal level and from a generational perspective?
Yeah, I do think that's fair. Some people do get their dreams. We won't mention any names here because we don't want to spoil too much. But for the most part, I think that it is we watch people fail in the course of the book. But the idea, I hope, at the end is that through their failure, they have learned the things that will maybe get them onto the next page after the book is over.
Right. So just to give a little bit of grounding, so we're not just talking in broad sweeping generalities and thematics all the way through. Outside the Gates of Eden pretty much starts with Dylan going electric and two approximately 15-year-old high school kids who are at the outset of their friendship. And they go see Dylan Electric and the impact that this concert has on these two guys, on these two kids. And then we sort of funnel out from there and we start meeting different characters.
A friend of mine who had not read much of the book, but he had read the beginning of it, said that Dylan concert was the last time that music could literally change somebody's life. And that's what the Dylan concert does in my book, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's the leap-off point.
Yeah, so that's kind of where the book has to start, because it does change somebody's life, change many lives.
Yeah. You can draw a straight line from that first page to the last page. And as you're weaving different characters in and out of the narrative, we're hopping all over the place. And one of the things I love about your writing, and I think it may be specific to Outside the Gates of Eden, is that not all of these threads tie up in a nice, neat way. Some of the narrative threads, they end without, any kind of Hollywood ending. They were just part of the window dressing of the book, but yet it wouldn't be what it is without it. Without actually mentioning any of these subplots. They're all crucial. They're all needed. No character is superfluous. And there's some that are, like I said, either fictitious or based on people you know, or like Bill Graham and other people from the 60s, all the, the game changers at the end of the 60s. And then there's also blends like Dave Fisher.
Right.
So
right.
Is Dave the only blend where it's kind of a liminal zone?
No, I would need some time to probably think about what other characters are, but there's a number of people who are based on actual persons, but I changed the name to avoid lawsuits or whatever.
Sally Rachel, is that basically Melanie crossed with Carole King?
Perfect. Exactly right.
Is that right? Okay. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically Melanie, if she had a game-changing album. Yeah.
And if she was maybe just a little more commercial, a little less eccentric.
The way that you do that, the way that you turn these real people into fictional characters, I mean, I find it so appealing because aesthetically, we've talked about this, in my film work, I very much am intrigued. I don't know what it is about taking from real life and just changing the context, but getting what I need aesthetically from my own life or from the things that I'm interested in and just repackaging them has always been of such high interest to me. And, it was the first thing that made me reach out in such a passionate way to connect with you initially.
The closer I stick to the truth, the better it works out for me. And I've said this jokingly, but I also think it's true, is I just don't have that great an imagination. So if I can use reference materials, I just feel so much more comfortable.
I think that's an excuse you've come up with along the way to cheat your way out of explaining what it really is.
This is probably not exactly the question you were asking, but in order to use someone who is a real person in the book, I have to be able to hear their voice in my head. That can happen quickly, or it can be difficult. And I had a long time there where I just could not picture what Jack Cassidy sounded like in conversation. I finally tracked down an interview on the web, and it was him and Jorma, of course, because inseparable. And Jack finally started talking about something he was excited about. And I said, this guy's a nerd. This guy's a classic, high school physics nerd who plays bass. And it was just so clear. And so I felt like I could write his voice.
It's funny. That. He and I have only spoken once because I'm now actually prepping for the Jefferson Airplane interview. And I told him that I cannot see a headband without thinking of it.
Yeah. I had problems with Jorma. My girlfriend is a former rock critic and rock reviewer, and she got to know Jorma because she was based in Connecticut and knew, a lot of these people who were just playing on the scene there. And I took that, and I had access to Jorma's manager, and I tried to get him to let me talk to Jorma. No dice. Even mentioning Orland's name, I still couldn't get in there. But he answered a limited number of questions by email through his manager indirectly. But it was enough. I mean, I'll just say this for those who might be of such a persuasion. There's a lot of gearhead stuff in there. So I had to know what amps Jorma was using at Woodstock.
Now, speaking of that, there's some tour de force sequences in the book that are these extended writing pieces that really, it's almost like, when I think back on the experience of reading it, it's kind of like, watching like an incredibly well put together single camera shot, like from The Third Man, the shot from Goodfellas, where you're watching this beautifully orchestrated piece that took a long time to put together so that the seams wouldn't show.
The opening shot of Touch of Evil.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Touch of Evil, not Third Man. But the Woodstock sequence where you literally, as a backdrop to, one of the main characters' lives, as a backdrop, you literally have pretty much every single act that appeared at Woodstock in the background, if not the foreground. There's only a couple that are replaced by fictional versions of the novel's corollary. And then there's a sequence at a commune that is just staggering. The thing about the book, and, I want to talk about the themes that you explore, but the characters, just living with the characters and the closeness that the reader gets to your characters. I mean, having read so many books in my life, I felt like I was so close to these people and I was so invested in what happened to them. And especially when it felt like they were kind of asleep behind the wheel of their own lives. For example, Alex in the early 1970s, I'm just like kind of silently praying that the guy finds his way, as if he's a friend of mine.
I've read a lot of fiction that is branded as satirical. And I really object to that sort of work. I don't want to say objective. I'm not interested in reading that kind of thing. I don't want to read a book where the author is impressing me with how much cooler he is than his characters. To me, that's just sad if you have to make up somebody to feel superior to. I'm more interested in, I want to know why Bill Graham, who seems like an asshole and actually was an asshole, but how does he see himself? When he first gets up in the morning and looks in the mirror, what does he see? How does he justify himself? And I've tried to give all the characters their moment where I'm not criticizing them. I'm not trying to act better than them. I want to know how they see themselves. What's the truth in their lives.
Yeah, and you take their dreams very, very seriously.
Absolutely, you have to. I would hope that one of the things that the novel does is it says it was not a waste of time to pursue our dreams in the 1960s. Because even though those dreams didn't happen, even though, as I like to say, there was, you've got a scale of 10 where for every 10 people who are at a movement action, there's probably one of them who's really actually committed and is actually going to get anything done. And to get those 10 people, you have to find 100 people who are there to show off their new shirt or try and get laid or try and get some drugs. And you winnow this down to maybe only a few people who've really got dreams that are important and all that. And I have watched in my lifetime, those dreams turn into mockery. I mean, people make fun of hippies now in the cruelest way. And there's just all these hippie jokes and stuff. Frank Zappa once said that he was never a hippie, he was a freak. And I always liked that. And so we've got these freaks who are on the outside of society, and they've been mocked. And now we're coming into a period of time when the skills that we had of working in communes, of organizing, mobilizing, of creating art, of working with crowds of people, learning how to grow your own food, all this stuff, suddenly you realize has been a preparation for us to step aside from what's passing for government these days and make our own world. And it's up to us. And we need all those things that we were mocked for when we first had those dreams.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, with the way that you treat that era, I don't need to ask you if you feel like the 60s were a waste of time. But to have a glimmer of promise and then have it sort of snatched back just as quickly and really cruelly in the following decade and beyond, to now where, we're having talk show hosts yanked off the air for really ostensibly not even being outspoken. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel didn't even do anything that seemed controversial. What he said, I saw the comments he made about Charlie Kirk. It didn't even seem that crazy. To go from A to B, does it seem then that the 60s made it even more disappointing? Well, I guess what I'm asking is, would Starship be less shitty if they hadn't been Jefferson Airplane?
No. I don't think so. I think that Starship would have been what they were, whatever their origins. And the fact that you can't fault the airplane retroactively for what Starship would become. It's not their fault. The great stuff that the airplane did, After Bathing at Baxter's, is my favorite, of course.
Yeah, it's great.
That'll live forever.
To me, what makes the Jefferson Airplane a full vision, a complete vision, a realistic vision, is the fact that it ended as Starship. Because to establish these unachievable ideals that really are the notions of children, but are, excitingly conveyed with a vast amount of passion, can only end in what we wind up getting from Nothing's Going to Stop Us Now, and we built this city.
But don't forget, whatever you think of Starship, they did bring oral sex into the mainstream of rock music.
Oh, yeah, Miracles, right?
Right. And then I Went Down on You.
Yeah.
Hey, that's something.
Hey, that's Marty. Yeah, without Marty, it drifted far, far away. And I'm saying it with no irony embedded in it. The complete vision of the Jefferson Airplane. It's like you don't have that without then it segueing into Jefferson Starship and then Starship. There's a completeness about...
A complete tragedy.
Yeah. I don't listen to Starship, but I love that they turned into that.
Yeah.
I do love that. And of course, Yorma didn't, Jack didn't. They kept their integrity. But at the end of the line, that is what the 60s turned into. Oh, hi, I'm Dave Gebrow. I threw my career as a licensed hearing instrument specialist in the trash, sold my house, and moved to the East Coast with my wife and 5-year-old son in order to focus on making the ultimate weekly podcast for music obsessives thrive. But weekly wasn't enough for me, so I bumped it up to 4 shows a week. Becoming a subscriber to Discograffiti's Patreon gives you access to hundreds of exclusive episodes. As a 2-show per week private, you get the weekly show by and for our Patreon family, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. As a 3-show-a-week lieutenant, you'll get early release, ad-free, extended director's cuts of the main show. They're the shows as they were intended to be heard. Plus, you'll gain access to half the Patreon archive and the upcoming Beach Boys Behind the Mirror companion episodes, which will feature dozens of special guests from within the Beach Boys camp talking about and rating their music. But as a 4-show-per-week major, you'll be drowning in a flood of must-hear binge listening, because I'll be bombarding you with episodes about super cool bands that are too subterranean for free Fridays. It's like going to music college, but with a tuition that makes all kinds of sense. Plus, our entire Patreon archive is yours. Discograffiti's Top 10, our Buried Treasure show, Rock Cousteau, our Slag Off show, Queasy Listening, and the Private Press with Paul Major. And all that for the price of only a cup of coffee a week. Times are tough, you say? Fret not, because there's a $1 tier. Or you could just join as a basic member and buy episodes piecemeal from our Patreon shop. Don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not giving. Check out patreon.com/discograffiti to find the tier that's right for you. Once again, that's patreon.com/discograffiti. This episode is brought to you in part by Bespoke LA. Located in the Fairfax district of Los Angeles, Bespoke LA is the modern podcaster's dream come true. It's got 2 podcast pods available, one with audio only and the other with both audio and video. Just think, you can start your own podcast tomorrow without investing a single penny in equipment. What, you don't have experience editing? Don't even sweat it. For an additional fee, Bespoke LA can edit your podcast. Or not, it's entirely up to you. Rates start at $75 an hour with discounts if you book 4 sessions at once. Go to bespokela.com/podcast. That's BSPOKELA.com/podcast for more information or to book your time today. And be sure to tell them that Dave sent you for a one-time 25% discount. So what's your own personal view on the success of the 60s in terms of what it instilled that we can still look around and see amongst us? Because to be fair, I didn't live, I was born in 72. You were conscious and cognizant during that time.
Yeah, but the thing that's cool is that there's people like Randy and Richie Unterberger, who's probably the best, to my mind, living rock journalist who always gets things right. A lot of these people were not there when the 60s happened, but they caught the bug and they've spread the word. And, you and Richie and Randy and all these other people are keeping, I don't want to say keeping the dream alive, but they are able to look at the accomplishments of the 60s with a fresh eye because they weren't there to get it mixed up with a bunch of other stuff that was irrelevant. They could see a through line, perhaps, that was more visible to them than would necessarily be to somebody who was there at the time.
Having lived through it, what were your takeaways? I don't know how much of your written work takes place in that era. I know not all of it does.
So what are my takeaways from the 1960s?
Yeah, like the Dylan concert for Jeff in the beginning of the book. What were the impactful experiences that put you on your path?
I had started my first novel when I was age 7. We've discussed this.
Yeah.
I don't know how much I can point to and say the 60s made me do this or the 60s led me to this other thing. I don't know. I don't think I can answer that question easily. But I'll brood on it.
You were, though, at that Bob Dylan show. I
was at the Bob Dylan show, absolutely. And absolutely it made a difference to me. I wanted to play electric rock after that show. Before that, I was a folk kind of guy. And I would go down to the Rubaiyat, which was the local coffee house, and drink a bunch of espresso and watch guys with acoustic guitars singing sincere songs. And after Bob Dylan, I wanted to rock and roll.
When did you stop following that thread? Was there an experience that put you off being a musician?
Well, I had, as many people did, and as one of the characters in the novel did, you have conflicts with your parents about getting into it. I wanted to play guitar. At age 15, I put a skill saw through the index finger of my left hand, and that pretty much put an end to the guitar playing, but I shifted over to drums. But I think part of that having to change instruments in midstream, part of just bad luck. I ended up not being a professional musician. And 1980, I was living in Austin. I was in an oldies band. There's kind of irony there that I was finishing my career playing the same music that I started it playing, only now it was oldies. But there came a point in 1980, I'm 30 years old. I'm crawling into bed at 3 a.m., having showered off the stink of beer and sweat, totally exhausted, dehydrated, and saying, I've got to make up my mind whether I'm going to pursue writing or pursue music. And I can't say that music is looking all that good right now. To be playing at biker bars and stuff like that, you come back from the bathroom and your bass player says, "Hey, you missed the knife fight, man." Okay.
I can imagine you've written some great songs, because some of the work that you describe in Outside the Gates of Eden, they sound like amazing either records or songs.
It's easy when you don't have to actually come up with the stuff, when you can just throw out a couple of clever lines and describe the effect the music is having, but you don't have to deliver the actual goods.
Yeah, but half of it's concept. And like, for example, the idea of After the End, I mean, that song has to be written. It's terrific. It has to be a song.
Ian Matthews at one point was going to rewrite the chords to the song God. I don't remember that one, but this is right at the end of Say Goodbye. The protagonist has had a very disillusioning experience, and then she gets out of it by writing a song called God, in which God comes down and buys the house next door and trashes the place and has dogs barking at 3 a.m. And Ian Matthews like that, and he had at one point said he was going to rewrite the chords and put it on one of his records, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a legitimate sorrow that I feel in reading Outside the Gates of Eden, where these records and these songs don't actually exist. I want to hear Laura Lee. I want to, hear the Kruppheimer record. The fact that I can't actually put them on seems like a horrifying tease. Although I am prone to hyperbole, I really don't think that I've read a book that dealt with the 60s or that had as a backdrop to it music that was as affecting and was as well written a book as Outside the Gates of Eden. And it's very difficult to talk about a book without being specific and giving things away. But the reality is, I definitely am on a mission to turn as many people on to this book as I possibly can. And the show has been going for 4 years, and I have not done that with a single novel. I've had a couple authors on. I've talked about their nonfiction books. I had Joel Sullivan on to talk about the Jim Gordon book. But this has got to be the best book about music and about the 60s and about all the different threads that the 60s introduced. And God damn, there are so many threads that were left untended from that decade, which you thankfully leave frayed and blowing in the wind, as, a lot of the concepts and the work of that time was left as well. And it's a world that, even though it's a huge book, I really can see myself going back to at some point, because it's a profound experience where you're living with these characters, but it's peeling away the onion of self-assessment and self-knowledge, sometimes in a very uncomfortable way for me. But it's everything I'm looking for from a book.
At the risk of being immodest, I think that I did, and this sounds weird, but I took that nearly 900-page book is stripped to the bone.
Yeah.
I don't think there was an excess word in there. And I dared, like one of my editors was saying, well, maybe we could cut 100 pages. I said, you show me 100 pages that can come out of that book without wrecking it.
What was your first draft? How long was it?
The first draft was, I guess it was around 1350 pages. As I remember, the second draft, after I completely retyped it, was a little bit longer, because for everything that I cut, there was something else that needed a little more explanation. For example, and this isn't a giveaway, Madeline is one of the characters we meet early on. A number of readers, my preliminary readers, thought that we should meet her a little bit earlier. And so I added a scene that was in high school for her. This is a scene where her friend comes over to her house and has just discovered You Don't Own Me by Leslie Gore and is singing it. And then there's a dance at the high school where they play a mean trick on her. And so that was stuff that I added. And that, in fact, was the last bit of fiction that I have written, was the introducing Madeline stuff at the early part of Outside the Gates of Eden.
I mean, did you feel in writing this like you got to scratch that itch? Because I know you've talked about, potentially just sketching out a book, but not actually writing it, as a true encore to this. But did you feel like in doing this that you satisfied what you set out to do?
Yes, absolutely. Not only that, I felt like with my complete oeuvre, as it were, that I had said everything I had to say. And for the next several months, I had two stories that I was considering writing. One was a novel about, basically a detective novel about the Atlanta bomber who hid up in the North Carolina hills for a while hanging out. He was somewhat involved with the militias, but not. And once I started researching it, I said, I don't like this guy. I don't like the people he's hanging around with. I do not want to write about him. And he's just not interesting. He's a fundamentalist. He's just got this narrow view, and he's not the sort of independent person living on the outside of society. He's just a jerk, So that went out. I had a story that didn't work out, and I looked, and every time I'd come up with an idea, I'd say, "Nope, I did that here, or I did that there." And after a while, I just said, "Guess I'm done." People will say to me, "We want another Shiner book. Just write another Shiner book," and I've done that. And I'll often say, don't you wish that named author here had quit at his third novel and not written those 5 repeats of it? And I want to be the guy who quits when his time is up. Quits while I'm ahead, so to speak.
This is a hard one to follow up. I mean, it's almost like you made it easy to quit, because this is like the behemoth what do you follow this up with?
Exactly.
It's like impossible to follow this up.
Yep.
So, if you love music, and if you're listening to this show, then you love music. And if you love the 60s, and again, I'm going to say it, if you're listening to Discograffiti, you probably love the 60s. There's no reason to not read Outside the Gates of Eden by Louis Shiner. What's the press that it came out on?
Subterranean.
Okay, so it came out on Subterranean. It's available on Kindle as well. A friend of mine who I told about it, he got it on Kindle. But I got to tell you, a lot of my experience in reading this book was the tactile sensation of holding this thing. It's truly weighty, and it feels great in your hands.
Do you like the typeset?
I love it.
I typeset the book.
Oh, you did? Wow.
I typeset the book. I designed the cover. I did everything. So
it's great. I have zero complaints.
Cool. Thank you.
Get yourself a copy of this thing and read it. And please, because I am dying to have conversations with people about this book, please reach out to me at dave@discograffiti.com and write to me about the book. I would love to engage in discussion about what you think about the book and, the themes and the characters. I'm really dying to have some pen pal relationships about the book. Louis, you produced a real masterpiece here.
Thank you.
And man, I hope that I'm capable of creating something, as mythically behemoth-like as what you did here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, that about does it. Stay tuned, because next week we've got part 6 of our Pet Sounds Deep Dive. Okay, here's the week up ahead. This Sunday, our weekly show within a show, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast, drops for our Patreon's private tier. These are real people with talent and a burning fire deep inside, just like you and I. Then come Monday, the major tier gets a very special treat. Here at Discograffiti, we operate just like the Jamaican chefs do. Everything is used, nothing is thrown away. Unfortunately, though, once in a blue moon, something like this happens. I put a tremendous amount of work into accumulating reams of research and listening to an artist's brand new record before our chat. Then it was rescheduled at the last minute, and when the interview finally did go down, it went swimmingly until I delivered the guest's intro, at which point it devolved into an absolute car crash. It's so awkward, actually, that I can barely listen to it. But my little boy had 2 teeth extracted that day, and I'll be goddamned if I'm going to bury this aberration after being made to be away from the poor guy for an hour to be subjected to the unwarranted rudeness that you're about to hear. So enjoy, if such a thing is even possible. The entirety of this episode will only be accessible on the major tier of our Patreon. There will be no short sneak peek running publicly for free this week. Don't miss it, or you'll only be getting part of the story. And then on Wednesday, the Lieutenant tier gets their early release, ad-free, super extended director's cut of Part 6 of the Pet Sounds Deep Dive. It's the episode as it was truly intended to be heard, with all the essentials left intact. And then come Friday, everyone else gets to join in on the action. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, Louis Shiner, Richard Holland, Rudy Fishman, Becky Boyd, Bespoke LA, my mom, my dad, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the Soldiers of Sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you, my friends. Speaking of friends, it's high time for some new ones. They're in our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the show, but there's a hell of a lot more. You get recaps of the day in music history, the ability to pitch questions to guests, polls that put you in the driver's seat on guest and band decisions, access to a thriving creative hub if you're looking for a collaborator, and much, much more. So don't miss out. You can find the link to the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound Facebook page right there in the show notes. And if you don't mess with the Zuck, no sweat. Just email me at info@discograffiti.com and I'll keep you in the loop. And of course, be sure to mark your calendars, because next Friday, October 24th, we're coming at you with Part 6 of our Pet Sounds Deep Dive. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. And so, from now till then, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti!